Welcome to this video. Now let's explore our template even further so that you get the best possible understanding of where you start. Now we finally want to take a look at our counter component to see how the data binding is working, but let's start somewhere else. Inside of the project, navigate into the client app folder, sources, and open up the app module.ts. Inside here, I want to show you this router module here. As you can see, here we are defining the routes for our project. So you can access the counter page by writing down /counter /fetch data, and this is the index page or the so-called home page, right? So the counter page is displaying the counter component, which is a TypeScript class, and the fetch data page is showing the component fetch data component, which is also a TypeScript class with a component decorator for sure. So let's see at our home component here. Let's right click on that and click on go to implementation. Now, as you can see, this is a TypeScript class. Let me scroll in a little bit here so that it's getting a little bit bigger on your screen. We have that TypeScript class, it's called home component, and it has no content at all, right? It has no methods, it has no fields, nothing, but it has a component decorator here, which has a selector, the HTML tag, app home, and once we can find that app home once we can find the app home tag in our HTML code, the home.component.html template will get rendered, right? And we can find that in home component HTML. You can see this is what then will get rendered. We already talked about this. So what I wanted to show you is where our navigation or our routes are defined, and that's happening in the important file called app module. Now, one thing to mention here is take a look at home component, counter component, etc. You can see, first of all, they have declarations right here, but also they are imported here. It's exactly like the using statement of a namespace in C#, right? So you go ahead and import the counter component, which is exported. So go ahead, go to implementation again, and you can see export, right? This is what we had in the very first video where we said, if you want to use a class in TypeScript somewhere else, you need to export it. And this import statement here, this is like using in C#, like when you use a class inside of a different namespace, right? You have to import it using the using keyword. All right, now go ahead and start the application using Control F5. You can follow along, or you can simply go ahead and watch the video straight away. It really depends on what you want to achieve. If you want to take a look at the code on your own and scroll through it a little bit, then go ahead and open up a test project and, well, go through it. Once the application is loaded, go to counter, and here we have that data binding again, right? So in the last video, we already talked about how it's working in detail. So once I click increment, you can see data binding happening. Let's explore this in our template. So close this and go ahead, navigate to app folder, open the counter folder, and now we got counter component, which is here, and counter component HTML, which is the template. Let me just pull that over here and zoom a little bit out in both sides so that you can see everything you need to see. Let me get that a little bit away. So, all right, let's see. We have our counter component on the left side. It has again a component decorator, which makes this TypeScript class a component, right? So you can see the selector app counter component. On the right side, you cannot see that, right? Where do we find that app counter component? On the left side, we got the counter component class, which has a component decorator, right? So as you can see, the template URL is showing counter component HTML, which is what we got on the right side right here. Now let's explore it here. We got that current count, which is a field, and we got that method, which is a counter increment, right? So this method simply increments the counter like we have discovered earlier. So now here you can see the button, pay attention there, and it has a click event. Right, you're using that simple braces here, and inside of them you have the name of the event for the button. For example, it's click. Now there are different event types, we will cover them, but we keep it simple. The click event is the most common one used for the button for sure, and once you click the button, the increment counter here is called, and for sure we have a name of that button here, increment. Now let me switch that to full screen mode here again. Take a look at the paragraph tag that we have right here. It's rendering a bold element, and here you can see the data binding happening to the current count field of our component, right? So here we're using the double curly braces and we're binding it to the current count. So how can we do that? Why can we access the current count here? That's pretty simple, because the template URL is matching to our content right here, right? This is the count. So in easy words, we are able to take the fields from the component, from the template, or from the related template, right? So for this counter component, the counter component HTML is the template. So this template can use the counter component fields, and the only one we have right now is the current count, which is that one here. So this is how you can use data binding, or this is how it's working here right now. Now let's explore this with our fetch data also. On the right side, move to fetch data folder, open fetch data component and fetch data component HTML. So let me close the other ones, and here you can see a little bit of more stuff going on already, but it's nearly identically, it's just a little bit more, right? So on the right side, we have the component. You can see we have a component decorator here again. We have our class, we have a constructor, and we have an interface. So like it's an interface, it's just like a class. Just think about that, like just an object. And here we got some HTTP stuff going on. Everything's not that really important, right? It's really more about like that field here, public forecast. I mean, all of this here is simply mock data, which is getting fetched by that, well, HTTP call here. So it's not real data, so it doesn't, or we shouldn't care anyway. So here we got public forecast, weather forecast, which is an array, right? Now, on the other side, we can take a look at our template now, HTML, and see if we make use of that forecast field. So let's switch over, and here we are in the template. And you can see that we have a table here, we have a t-hat, and inside of that t-body, we are using a loop, right? So ng4 is like a for loop in C#. So for each, or let's call it a for each loop, that's a little bit easier to, well, to say in an easy, or let's say it's a for each loop, that's easier to explain. So for each forecast in forecasts, right? So this is just the Angular kind of way to write a loop. It's directly inside of an HTML tag. You can see ng4 let, which is like var, right? That got replaced with let, which is like var. So for let forecasts of forecast, and forecasts is that one right here. So this is the field. So we are looping through that field, and then again we are binding it using the double curly braces to the element which we are looping through right now, right? Forecast.date. And forecast.date, temperature C and F and summary is exactly that, what we got right here inside of that interface, because that array is of type weather forecast, right? So I think you really got the point. So your key takeaway is more of how data binding in general works, that you have a component, and inside of that component you have fields, and you can access those fields from your HTML template. And now you already know that Angular has some sort of specific syntax for data binding, for example, and we got specific keywords to write loops, for example, in Angular.